Hey, I'm with Kelly today, who's head of GTM at CodeIQ, and he's gonna show us how he uses Claude Code to automate cold email campaigns. So that means like the entire setup from ICP research to list building to data enrichment to copywriting to even putting those campaigns into sales engagement platforms and then letting them run. Kelly, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like we said, I'm the head of GTM here at CodeIQ. And so my job pretty much is to help us do GTM for CodeIQ on our own, along with taking a lot of our high profile clients, helping us actually using Claude Code to leverage a lot of the processes that we're building now for ourselves to start using them for our clients, really to be able to 10x our GTM output, but also the quality of GTM that we're actually doing right now.
Okay, a question I have is, there are many tools that either promise or that allow you to automate prospecting, like, campaign creation and so on. Like there are some actual dedicated tools for doing so. But like, why is it that using Claude Code for that is so powerful?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for using Claude Code is that you can do this contextualization building where you can actually really stack the work that you're doing on top of each other. Like I think a lot of these softwares right now, typically you're kind of working in silos. Like you're building a list on one platform, maybe you're using another platform to enrich the data, and then you're pushing all that data to the actual sequencer. And so they all have the same data, but they're all kind of, again, like living in silos, and the softwares aren't really talking to each other. Versus with Claude Code, you can save everything into kind of one system or kind of brain/like repository that you can actually reference. And so what happens is all of the leads that you're targeting, all of the copy that you're using for these leads, all of the processes that you're doing manually and kind of day to day, Claude Code is able to pick these things up, learn it, and then be able to help you kind of automate this process. But then again, I think being able to have a system where everything is entirely connected from like your campaign data to the leads to the actual copy is super helpful, because Claude's going to be able to help you improve the quality of the outputs that you're doing based on the actual reply data. And again, just being able to know and see all of the actual contacts and the research that you've already done on them as well. So it's nice being able to pretty much use Claude Code to have all this context in the one space, especially when you're launching multiple campaigns, like on a weekly or, monthly cadence.
Then you know what, let's get straight into it. Can you just like explain slightly what you're gonna demo for us today, and then the floor is yours.
Great. And so what I'm going to walk through today is essentially how you are able to take a company list, like what I have here on the right side, so a list of companies that you are looking to pretty much target, and then apply an ICP criteria score. So based on different criteria of what you're looking to actually target for your business or your company, basically how we can take this list of companies, score them, so that way we're prioritizing the right type of contacts. And then from here, we'll end up finding the right contacts at these companies based on the persona that we're looking for, whether this is sales, marketing, growth leads, etc. So we'll be able to take the list, qualify them, find prospects at the qualified companies that we want, and then we're able to pretty much use Claude Code to go and fetch some of the copy frameworks.
And so what we're looking at is like a list of companies, and this list of companies, how did you build this this initial list of companies?
Yeah, so this initial batch list, I actually ended up using just some specific firmographics based on like revenue and company size. And so there were a handful of tools that you can use for something like this, whether it's Clay or Apollo. Lucia is another one as well. But yeah, this is basically some general information that you're able to get from almost, majority of actual data providers. Even LinkedIn Sales Nav as well, you'd be able to use to kind of help you start finding some of these companies as well. But yeah, either any of those options would help you actually end up working.
Okay. And how many companies do you have in this list?
Yeah, in this particular list, I think we have roughly about 111. And,
Okay.
This is mainly for the sake of time. Like, this process is able to work at a scale of, tens of thousands of records at the same time. Like right now, I'm using Claude Code to be able to process tables of upwards of 50,000 rows. And so you can really do this entire process completely at scale as well.
Okay, so the demo you're gonna do to us, I mean, it is gonna be of only 100 companies for the sake of simplicity. But what you're saying is that if we had 10,000 companies in this, then I guess the only difference would be that it would take a bit longer, but it would work all the same.
Absolutely, yeah. So it would definitely, be able to work entirely the same. It would just take slightly longer. And the reason why this is great for Claude Code versus, using something else is that within Claude Code, there's going to be a very, essentially little to no hallucination in the efforts that you're making. Because specifically for the scoring criteria, what we're actually using is Python script to look at the raw data and the actual numbers from the CSV, like from our company list. And it's using that for the actual scoring. So it's not necessarily like using any type of like, data that the AI may be guessing on or things of this nature. But it's specifically using the data that we're already feeding it to be able to make the actual scoring criteria. So there's no assumptions or kind of like hallucination or, really like guesswork. There's no room for that in this section. So being able to do this at scale is absolutely feasible. And then same goes for even being able to go and fetch prospects, at like 10,000 companies. And, of course, even the actual copy itself. As what's really nice about Claude Code is that it'll actually batch itself and do things, essentially at the rates that it best recommends. Instead of running running 1,000 companies at a time, typically it'll batch between 100 to 200. So that way the quality of what it's doing is also, always on par as well.
Okay. And so here, I think because you started your explanation, but you didn't finish it. But like from what I gathered, we have this list of companies, and then you have some scoring criteria. And so essentially what that means is that you're segmenting accounts based on how good of a fit they are for our company. So like a tier 1
Correct.
lead would be like a great fit, like a tier 3 lead would still be a fit, but like not as much of a fit. So like you added this scoring criteria inside of a document. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take a list of companies, have Claude evaluate this list against your criteria. Then based on this, it's going to segment it. And then I assume that like based on the tiering system, it's going to do different sort of enrichments, which will involve for the list of companies that are a good fit, will be finding the relevant people in the company, will be enriching their email, perhaps phone data. And then what will we do next?
Yeah, so once we get all of the context from the qualified companies that are scored for us, ideally we're also going to have Claude Code actually create the sequence inside of our sequencer. So it's going to first create the actual copy based on best performing frameworks that we've already given it. And so it's going to be able to use our templates, our frameworks, things that we know are already working from other campaigns, generate the copy for this particular campaign that we end up doing today. And then it's going to create the actual campaign inside of our sequencer, which for today we're going to be using instantly.ai. And so from here, it's going to create the campaign, add the copy, and then also push all of the leads directly. And then the last thing that we would need to do is essentially just hit play on the actual campaign to officially launch it. But even that, Claude Code would be able to do completely on its own.
Wow. So we start with a list of companies, we write a few prompts, and then we end up with copywritten campaigns inside of our sales engagement platform that are targeting the relevant people inside of our target list of companies.
Exactly.
But only for the companies that are a great fit for us.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. And the entire process will basically end up being done with natural language. So we are basically just going to type what we're looking to do. There's really going to, this really removes the barrier to entry for a lot of teams as well. So I'll kind of be walking through today how we can just use natural language to actually be able to execute this and do it from start to finish.
Perfect. Let's see it.
So the first thing that we'll end up doing is first dropping in the actual data. So one thing that I end up having here is that I have my Finder. And so this is a saved data directly onto my laptop. And so I'll basically be pulling this company CSV list that has the raw data. And so from here, we can just hit Control-C to pretty much copy it for us. So that way, Claude Code has the ability to actually be able to read files that are locally saved on my computer. And so in this case, I want to tell it, Claude Code, I need you to use our scoring criteria and look at our company list here and score all of the companies and give me the tier overview. And so now what's going to happen is that Claude Code will essentially first look at the list of companies, and then next you can see here it's reading two files at the same time. So it's reading, and if I can actually pull this up, so it's reading our scoring criteria document, and it's reading our company CSV list at the same time. And so,
Kenny, one question here. How does it know? How does it know to read this file specifically?
Yeah, so this really falls into the actual Claude folder structure that you have. So in this particular case, I basically give directions to Claude in a MD file. And so, you can actually have Claude create these things for you of the directions and things that you want it to follow. So, I specifically tell Claude that anytime I mention a scoring criteria, I want it to reference this document. And then anytime I'm mentioning, like a list or a company list or contact list, that I typically will provide it unless I explicitly ask it to go and find it for me. And so in the beginning of, when you're getting your Claude Code set up, these are some things that you'll actually set up and be able to have Claude Code actually do for you. So you would just prompt it to create an MD file for you. You would drop in some of the directions based on the things that you want to do. And then you can be able to kind of talk to it, and it will have this context of the files that you're looking for, context about your business, as well, as again, like the copy frameworks and things of this nature.
Okay, so like the Claude MD file is essentially like this master file where you have, like your biggest rules. And so to create it, you just create it the same way you do anything within Claude. So you just say, create this Claude MD file. And so when it comes to this specific scoring criteria, you say, okay, create this Claude MD file. And whenever I'm enriching list, like you use like this file. And so now it will know. And so every time you mention scoring criteria, it will always know that this is the file it has to compare your list against.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's very easy. You just tell Claude Code like what you're looking to do, the directions that you want, and Claude Code will actually help you set up the folder structure that you want. So, let's say you have your business, so you will have Claude Code, kind of create that for you. Like, hey, let's create a folder for Claude IQ. And then you'll tell Claude Code like, hey, these are the directions and things that I always need you to follow. And then you can create different folders. Like, maybe you want a folder for all of the campaigns that you're pushing, like all of the actual data. Then you'll want a folder for all of the context and things of this nature. But yeah, being able to give Claude Code that initial context really is how I'm able to do this, and kind of just tell it in language of like, hey, I need you to go use this particular criteria to be able to go and score these companies, as it already has that context of the file that I'm discussing.
Amazing. Cool. So I think like now it's done.
Correct. Yes, it's already done. It finished a couple minutes ago. And so now what we can see here is that it went through the tier list. It gave us, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, companies that are disqualified. And it gave us some of these scoring ranges. It gave us an average here, along with like a handful of companies that should basically be some of the priority targets and like the top scorers in some of these other rounds as well. And so, and again, so the interesting thing here is that it actually went through, and the speed of this was relatively quickly, especially since, we're only doing 110 companies, but if we were doing 1,000, it really wouldn't be much longer either. And so once we get this data, once Claude Code went ahead and save this.
Can you one question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing in the tier overview is that like we have some tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then like we have DQ. And so there is like the recommended action. And so like we say, okay, the tier 1, we only have 3 in this instance, and it's priority outbound senior AE. So what that means is that like in this case, we're gonna sort of feed that to our sales team so that they do some manual outreach. Is that what it is?
Correct. Yeah. So in this particular case, yeah. So this would kind of be like some priority things where, we're like in our particular case, we want to use this tiering system to be able to feed our sales team the leads that are like, in this tier 1 kind of criteria. And then we would have people that are in that tier 2, tier 3, tier 2 people we're usually doing a lot of multi-channel sequencing with. So this would be email and LinkedIn, through Lemless and Instantly. And then, tier 3 would be typically just more automated email, where it's kind of like our lowest priority. They're more of a nurture kind of sequence. But correct, the recommended actions, and really this can kind of be set for your business. But those recommended actions are basically for us. Yeah, so basically those tiers and the way we actually have these actions set up is, specifically for the way that our business is operating. And so, from here, you're really able to kind of have it outlined however you'd like, right? So that way Claude Code could either push these into your CRM for you, or they can, send them as a CSV to your sales team as well. So there's a lot of different things that it can actually do for you from this actual scoring criteria.
Okay, so now we have our scoring criteria. What's next?
Yeah, so once we get this, we have our scoring system done. We have our companies that are tier 1, tier 2. The next piece that we want is that we actually want to be able to go and find context at these companies, right? So the next piece here is that we want to be able to do, okay, great. Perfect. Now let's go find sales leaders at tier 1 and tier 2 companies. And so what it's now going to do is that, again, I have already given it the context of the type of things that we want to be able to do. And so you can see here, it's going and it's pulling the tier 1 and 2 domains. Then it's going to go to Apollo actually to be able to go and get the sales leaders. So the way that you would actually set this up is by giving Claude Code your Apollo API key or the API key of any database provider that you're actually using, whether this is Blitz API, Lima Data, Arc AI, any of these, I would really be able to do the trick. And from here, you also want to be able to feed at their API docs. And so, if you just look up Apollo API docs, Blitz API docs, any of them will actually be able to pop up. And so you can actually feed Claude Code the domain of that site, of their API docs, and essentially give it to it, and it'll be able to create these kind of, again, like documentation for you of how their API works. So when you give them a key, then Claude Code can actually take what you're looking to do, and it can actually go and create these API payloads and runs completely on its own. So you never really have to see what's going on in the back end. And you can see here that we went ahead and already found contacts, which is phenomenal. You can see here, we found 159 sales leaders across 52 of the 57 companies. Maybe some of these other companies, they were smaller, so maybe they didn't have sales leaders, but we're actually able to find, a good number of contacts. And so what you're seeing here is that we have it broken down by seniority, which is phenomenal. And then you can also see how many contacts we're getting per company here. And so we could do things like, hey, actually, I only want 5 people per company, and Claude Code would then go and fetch the top 5 from each company. Or we can open up the criteria more of like, hey, for any companies we didn't find sales leaders for, let's go fetch their founders essentially.
Yeah. And Kenny, what do you recommend here? This is more an outbound question, but like, how many contacts per company should we reach out to?
Yeah, my personal recommendation is I would say, if we're doing one particular persona, where in this case, we have sales leaders and we have a handful of people. We have some that are in the C-suite. We have some that are directors, MVPs, etc. My recommendation is typically no more than 4 or 5. I think this is really kind of the sweet spot, especially when you're looking at these smaller companies, right? I think typically what I like to do personally is more of a bottoms-up approach where, if we're targeting the sales team, I think it's great to kind of either share resources and value to even like people on their SDR and AE teams. At some point, you can also target their SDR managers. Maybe you're inviting these people to webinars or events, or providing some lead magnets here as well. And then by the time you go to target the actual VP or manager, there's potential where, some of these internal conversations may have already been happening within the sales team. Maybe their sales team is talking to their team about the documentation that you sent them, or their AE or SDR team lead is talking about the webinar that they attended from your company. And so by the time you get to, the VP or the, chief of sales, etc., they may have already heard some of these internal conversations, but you can also actually speak to the fact that you've already communicated with some people from their team as well. So I definitely think anywhere between like 4 to 5 people really per company is a very good sweet spot kind of per campaign. And of course, this can vary, if we're only targeting, VPs and directors in sales, then maybe we're only doing 2 to 3. So that way we're not oversaturating the context that we're going for. But then, that way that leaves some room where if those contacts don't reply, maybe in 60 days, we re-engage with different people at that actual company as well. Once we get this part and we get the actual context that we want from our qualified companies, the next phase is that we want to be able to tell it. So we can see here, 144 of them already have emails. 15 of them still need it. So we'll just do for the 15 that don't have work emails, let's enrich it to find them. And then combine. So what I'm going to do here now is that, again, I'm already giving it some other data, some other API providers that we've used to basically be able to do some of this actual email enrichment. So think things like Lead Magic, Prospeo, again, Lima Data as well. Any of these options would really be able to work. And so you do the same process. So you are able to feed Claude Code the API key, and then it's able to basically, read their API docs, use the API key, and actually be able to go and run the actual enrichments for you. And so now it's basically going through. You can see here it's already completed. So we were able to get 10 additional emails by being able to use our enrichment. So these are from Apollo, 144. Then we were able to get 10 more from our other enrichment data provider that we ended up using here. And so now we're basically only missing 5 emails.
How does it pick which other one he's going to use?
Yeah, so in this particular case, I actually did feed it the specific option that I wanted it to use. So in this particular case, we're actually using something called Lima Data, but you would be able to give it any option. So again, this would kind of fall inside of those directions. So like those directions of kind of, like what you would kind of want to use, right? And like in our case, we are giving Claude the context of like, hey, Claude, here's our tech stack. Here are the API keys for these tech stacks. Here are their
Okay.
API docs. So that way Claude knows, like, hey, Kenny usually uses Apollo for company or contact data. Kenny also uses these providers for email enrichment or validation. And then, Kenny is also using Instantly or Lemlist for actual sequencing as well. So all this information would live inside of that initial documentation that you're actually giving Claude Code.
If I didn't do the documentation, as in like, let's say I'm just like YOLO doing this campaign, so
Yeah.
I'm not preparing things ahead of time, I could just say, hey, like just use, say, the full enrich API or Prospero API to like fetch those
100%.
email addresses.
Absolutely.
And then like even if I didn't have the API key connected yet, it could tell me, oh, by the way, you don't have the API key. So I could just like
Correct.
go paste the API key and then tell it, okay, figure out how to connect it, looking at the documentation on their website. And then it will work as well, right? So like in this case, you're
exactly.
organized,
So,
but it still works if you're
yeah, in
not.
most cases, like, let's say somebody didn't have, they didn't put the documentation together, or they're kind of just getting started in Claude Code. You could 100% just give it, the tools that you want to be able to use. Tell it, hey, here's the link to the API docs to go fetch it. And then it'll actually go read them. And when you go to, tell it that you want to use this tool, it will first look for the API key. If you don't have one, then it will request it from you. And so even if you don't have the documentation, it still is able to use the data once you give it the API key and the documentation of the exact tool that you're actually looking to use here. And so any of the options would be able to work, right? If I wanted to tell it, hey, like, let's actually use Prospero to be able to enrich the emails, essentially from here, we'll just request our API key, and it'll actually likely go on its own, use one of its sub-agents to then be able to go and fetch the API documentation while I go and get the API as well.
Nice, perfect. Okay, what's next?
Yeah, so once we again, right now what we have so far is we have our list of qualified companies. Now we have sales leaders at these qualified companies, and we have their emails. So we have what we need to be able to do an actual outreach campaign to them. And so the next piece here is that we actually want to be able to go ahead and actually create the copy, right? So we want Claude to be able to go back and look over the copy that we've used, look over our frameworks, things of this nature, and then be able to craft copy based on what's best performing for inside of our system. And so, for this particular case, we have another webinar coming up soon, actually. And so I'm going to do something like, let's see here. Let's now write copy for this campaign, which is going to go to the sales leaders. And we are looking to pitch a webinar we are doing. Let's see here. Regarding ads through LinkedIn. And so again, I'll kind of put in this natural language prompt, and you can see here all the prompts that I'm actually using again, are very, rudimentary. They're very basic. And it's because, Claude is already understanding the type of things that I'm using to work. And so the first thing you can see here of what it actually did is it went in and read our copy frameworks MD. And so this is just, again, a file where we have the frameworks and the things that we know that are working. And so that way Claude has this context. It can take the campaign idea that I gave it, and then it can go and actually find the type of context and campaigns that we've ran in the past that we know are working. And then from here, it can actually take the context that I'm giving it about the campaign and then be able to actually go and, be able to actually fill out the data for us. Like, for example, one thing that I didn't put here is I didn't put the date or time. So if we wanted to give it some additional context, go ahead, Mish.
And Kenny, sorry to cut you up. So like this copy frameworks MD file that we created. So essentially what we did is that, because we've run this agency for 3 years now, and we've had like hundreds of clients, we actually tried a lot of different copywriting templates. And so we sort of had some that like failed and some that like completely outperformed. And so we essentially like created this document based on our best campaigns. So we fed that to Claude, and then now like he's able to sort of fetch like the best performing template in regard to the goal that we have in this case, which is trying to get people on our LinkedIn ads webinar.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So exactly what happened is, actually in this particular case, I had Claude Code go to our email sequencer, pull the campaign analytics, look at our best performing campaigns, and then pull the copy from that. And again, Claude Code did this entirely on its own. I just gave it the instantly API docs. And so from here, I was able to use like the get campaign API and the get copy API to be able to get the campaigns that were best performing based on the actual data metrics. And then based on these campaigns that were best performing, it was then able to go and actually fetch the copy here. And so then what ended up happening is that once we actually ended up getting this copy from Instantly, now what's happening is that Claude Code is saving this data. It's now understanding that these are the type of frameworks that we're using. And so, what it did here is that it went to the copy frameworks. It knows that I'm looking to do a campaign about a webinar. And so it pulled our best performing webinar template and then basically just injected the campaign, data that I'm giving it of like, hey, this is a campaign where we're looking to promote our webinar that's upcoming about running, LinkedIn ads for, GTM motions. And so it's able to take the context that I'm giving it, like the general campaign idea, and just inject it into the best performing copy. And so this way, it's constantly going to continue to be able to learn and kind of improve on the copy that we're actually doing.
Nice, good. Okay. So what's next now that we have our copy?
Now that we have this copy, this is the copy that we approved. You can see here, everything is pretty much set. The next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to end up bringing over this copy real quick. And so I'm just going to highlight actually the sequencer that we end up having. And so let me just bring some things over. And so you can see here, now we have our sequencer pulled up here. And so if I am just pulling this up, the next thing that we do is like we already have our copy. We have everything ready to go. And so what I'll go ahead and do now is, perfect. Let's create a campaign in Instantly. And let's name it, webinar, LinkedIn ads, invite. Inject the copy above. And also upload. We will tell to upload the sales leaders. So upload the sales leaders we found emails for. And so now what's going to happen is, again, it's going to now go and pull the API docs. You can see here we have the Instantly API docs inside of a documentation as well. And so now it already went ahead and saw that it's able to create the campaign. So now it's going to go and create the campaign. And you can see here, we don't have it up on Instantly yet. So once it's actually done, I'll go ahead and reload the page so that we can see it pop up in real time. And so what's going on now is that it's creating the campaign. It's using the Instantly API docs in the back. And so it's going to create it. It's then going to upload the actual copy directly for us. And then lastly, it's going to actually upload the leads. And so just to kind of, give those that are watching a comparison of what this is typically like versus, the typical process is that usually, one would be able to take a company list. Let's say they're using something like Clay or they're using Apollo to get it. Then they would have to go and find the actual context for this. Again, maybe they're using Clay, maybe they're using an API data provider, but they'd have to go in and get these contexts for the companies after they run some type of table or enrichment to be able to go and score the companies. And then, lastly, they'd have to go and create the copy, right? So if, you don't have a kind of, source of truth or like a GTM brain that has your copy, of course, you're kind of starting from scratch. Or you have to go into Instantly and kind of find your best performing campaigns yourself to be able to go and fetch that copy. And then once you get that, you need to go create a campaign inside of Instantly or your sequencer, copy and paste the emails, go back to wherever your data is, download it, and then re-upload it to Instantly. And so you can see
it's
here.
So annoying. Like it takes an insane time, and it's like,
Exactly.
you do it all the time. And like here I see, it looks like it took 57 seconds for Claude to import all of the leads, to put the copy, to create the campaign. Like this is crazy.
Exactly. And so, this is like the things that it's really replacing, right? And so, this process end to end for us would be able to take maybe 5-7 minutes if we were explaining, like at every step. And so this really is able to help you cut down your time. But again, I think the biggest thing here is that it's also removing the barrier to entry of, how technical you really need to be. You don't really now need to be very technically savvy to be able to go and create some of these things, and use some of these data providers. And so now if we just reload our Instantly page, you can see here, the campaign is now here. So it's already drafted for us. And so if I click on it here and, I'll open it up larger for us now as well. So here are the leads. We have all 154 leads. We have their emails. We have their contact, company name, their website. All the data is already here for us. And then if we open up the sequence, you can see here, it already has the copy. I told it about the date, so it injected that for me. In this particular template, we maybe just want to go ahead and drop in some numbered bullet points here. And this is, again, something that I didn't tell it to do. But so from here now, the copy is set up basically for us. It already loads up our email signature as well.
And so I don't know if you specified it, but did you mention, how the instantly API work? Because it's essentially like the same sort of idea as to how to connect it, but then it's like instantly has some endpoints that allow you to create campaign, to add leads, to even edit the campaigns, and so on. Do you want to give like some little more clarification on that?
Yeah, so the way it works really is that honestly, Claude is quite smart, where you can just give it the documentation, and it, of course, like typically API docs, they have descriptions of what they're best used for, right? And so Claude is able to then, one, it's using sub-agents to go and get all the information and kind of gather all the context. But, Claude is actually smart enough of a model to be able to look at the documentation, understand like what it should be using what for. Like you can see here, it had no errors the entire process. Like there were 0 errors. It took 59 seconds. And it knew exactly what to use for each step. And it's really good because, again, all I did here was just feed it the actual API docs from instantly. It digested them, it understood them, it documented them, and then it went ahead and actually was able to start actioning them relatively right away. And so, again, thankfully, Claude is actually smart enough to be able to kind of do some of those things quite autonomously without you needing to, give it so much additional kind of direction. Like the only directions here that I'm actually using right now for Claude Code is I'm telling it like, hey, I want to use, this is the scoring criteria that I want you to be using. And this, I want you to use Apollo when I want to find contacts. And then anytime I want to push copy, use these frameworks that I'm already using. And then, lastly, when it comes to like a sequencer, use instantly to be able to make campaigns for me. And that's kind of it. Those are really like the 4 lines inside of the actual MD file. And so when Claude's actually going through and it's doing this, again, it already has the API documentation to be able to really understand kind of what it should and should not be using. So it really kind of does a lot of that process already for you.
So I have a few questions here. So because like, are we done with the demo right now?
Yeah. So yeah, really the last one I would kind of show here is that, again, when we actually open this up, you can see here that the copy is already done. Like the first names are adding in properly. Our email signatures are also loading up outside of the preview as well. And so even the actual email settings and options that we have in instantly are also already set up. Our number of emails that we want to hit, the delivery optimization, the time gap between our emails, all the settings are also already completed. And so really now also our schedule is completed. This is the schedule that we like to use. And so from here, all you now need to do is hit resume campaign and it's pretty much kicked off entirely for you. And so, yeah, that really is kind of end to end, typically what this process actually looks like for us at the moment.
And yeah, and like here, like, cause you would be clicking resume campaign instantly. Could you just tell Claude to like press play on the campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if we really wanted to, like, we would be able to tell Claude to actually go and, legitimately launch the campaign if we wanted to as well. You can see here, it put the status in draft, but we would be able to tell it to, hey, actually, let's turn this status to active. And it can actually launch the campaign for us if we wanted to as well.
Nice. And Kenny, so one question I have is, how tough do you believe it is for people to replicate? As in, like, people watching this video, let's say they want to do the exact same thing you did, aka like setting up this campaign autonomously via Claude Code. Like, what should they do? Like, do we have something we can provide to them that can help them get started?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So I actually created everything that I just showcased, start to finish. I actually created something where essentially it's a GitHub, but it actually is the full GTM starter pack, where it can actually help walk you through everything from, and I'll kind of show it on my screen here as well, but it can actually help walk you through everything that you would need to do to be able to launch this entirely on your own here. And so you can see here, this is one entirely open to the public as well. So be sure you're able to drop the link inside of the description. But
nice.
Here, what's going to happen is that we have the GTM starter kit. Here are some of the example prompts of, again, like what I'm using. These are the directions of, hey, score these companies, find these type of sales leaders, get these work emails, etc. And so what I also created is a step-by-step guide on how you can actually, one, install Claude Code, how you can actually duplicate this repository of code that I already created, installing the Python scripts that I already have to be able to do the scoring. And then also it's outlining what type of API keys that you would also need here. So for us, we're using Apollo, and we have like the email enrichments and instantly as well. But we would be able to, you would be able to input any of these, and so it kind of goes through, kind of showcases this, and then you can see here the kind of final structure of what the goal is like, hey, you give it a company list, it scores them for you, gets you the contacts, gets their emails, writes the copy for you, and then it creates and deploys, the actual sequence, right? And so, the reason I'm laughing is because that almost sounds too easy, but really it is just as simple as this of kind of going from start to finish, right? It's like we're kind of, showcasing like our, what we're doing really now is like able to do something like this where you can do this entire thing, from your laptop and just, entirely in one kind of space. And so I actually put together the actual folder structure for you. And so I put together the Claude MD file that tells Claude how to actually use everything. And so you can use this, GTM starter kit to be able to actually kick off, entirely what I just showcased. And all you need to do theoretically is just plug in your API keys and tell Claude what type of scoring criteria you want. And once you do that, it can actually go and basically do everything else for you. So yeah, I give basically some other options here as well, and comes with different customization points, things of this nature. But you are able to use this entirely to actually be able to duplicate this entire process that I went ahead and showed today.
I love it. Okay, then we're gonna share the link in the description. Kenny, I think we are done with the demo. We even have like the free playbook. I didn't expect that sort of like gift would be like such a big gift. So we're gonna drop it in the description.
Absolutely.
Before we cut off this conversation, do you have some final things you want to say or some final advice you want to share with the GTM community?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I think the hardest part, and I think this is a lot of things of not only with Claude Code, but, I think even in general, like with Fly for Sales, is that, really the hardest part is starting. I think that once you actually get started, things kind of just go, they kind of just fly, and they have the snowball effect of the hardest part is to kind of download Claude Code, get it situated. But once you open up the terminal and you actually start typing things away, and you realize how similar it is to just like using Claude or ChatGPT inside of your Safari or Google browser. Once you realize that it's just as easy as those things, your imagination really is able to open up, and you can start seeing all the things that you can really start doing. And so, one thing that I recommend to everybody is one, just start. Of course, you have the GTM starter pack kit now that makes it super easy to start. You just copy and paste everything in there for you. But the second part is that I would really recommend it to everybody to honestly kind of record what their day-to-day typically looks like and kind of go through the motions of their workday. You give that recording to Claude Code and like have it actually help you brainstorm the type of things that you can automate or change or do better or improve and do efficiency. I think that this is really the future when it comes to not only GTM, but to personal assistants or sales or marketing, like LinkedIn content, YouTube content. I think that this is kind of, being able to find ways on how we can do things quicker and better and at a, better quality is, really you can turn Claude Code into a second part of your brain for you, something that has all the information about your business, about, the work that you're doing, the content that you're putting out there, and it can also constantly be improving. So yeah, I think that is definitely the advice that I would give to anybody who wants to kind of get started, who hasn't started yet, maybe because it looks intimidating or there's, AI is moving so fast. I think that Claude Code could actually help you, one, catch up, but then move faster than, the people around you.
Yeah, I love it. I love the way you frame it. It's like a ChatGPT that can do things. And so it's like most people not talk to ChatGPT. They're asking questions and then like every time you have a headache, you're like, is it bad or is there something? But I guess like every time you have a question and you have now this reflex of asking ChatGPT, but now you just need to think about how like it's not something that it's like ChatGPT that can do things, right? So it's like
exactly,
those LLMs, you know everything. No, like these LLMs can basically like this AI coding tool, can basically do everything almost.
Yeah, absolutely,
in,
they can do a lot of things.
Yeah, and then to the point, I think like the scariest thing is like this terminal. It looks like it's a developer hacker thingy. But it's like once you go past it, you just realize that you're just chatting to it. And so in this case, you were typing into it, but then you can use an extension like Whisperflow or Aquavoice, whatever you want, and then you could just be talking to this. And so like it's just be like having a conversation with some sort of assistant, asking it to do things and then waiting for the assistant to finish and then giving it feedback, and then just like this constant feedback loop and iteration just ends up building some pretty impressive things. So
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
love it, yeah. Kenny, thank you very much. This was an amazing demo. I'm also gonna drop your LinkedIn profile yours. I think we're gonna probably co-publish this anyway, so people are gonna be able to find your new YouTube channel. Plus, we're gonna add in the description your profile's URL. But just for people to know, it's like if you need to follow one person in the Outbound AI GTM space, it is Kenny. And I can tell you, like, he's the head of GTM at Code Like You, and having seen him work behind the scenes, I can tell you, like, this guy is crazy. I'm actually afraid for his health because I don't know whether he sleeps or not. So like, I want to be like, Kenny, like, just work a little less. But yeah, but like, if you want to have the best insights on this space, I really recommend following him. And follow me as well. Follow the entire Code Like You team. And if you want to learn more, we have some other videos on the topic. And don't forget to download just free resource that Kenny just created specifically for this.
First, Mish, thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.